Welcome back to episode 3 of season 2 of the 3 Data Wise Guys, where we're thrilled to welcome Ellen Nielsen, currently the Chief Data Officer of Chevron, who is responsible there for making data accessible and trusted to enable better decision making and create value through the enterprise. It's quite a mission. She joined Chevron in 2018 as a general manager of category management and supply chain leadership. And during her nearly 30-year career, she's worked in IT and in the supply chain in numerous industries, including IT, automotive, and recently in the oil and gas sector in both senior and executive roles with companies like Henkel, Hewlett Packard, GE, and Siemens. She has served in several leadership roles in procurement and supply chain as a CIO and head of shared services for North and Latin America. So can also speak to some of the international challenges. She's currently in the advisory board of PIDX, the Petroleum Industry Data Exchange, which supports process information and technology standards in our industry. And especially important today during Women's History Month, she's a member of the advisory board of Women Leaders in Data and AI, supporting women entering the field as a professional career. At Chevron, Ellen also serves as an advisory board member of the largest employee network in Houston. She has a degree in IT engineering and is an avid skier, golfer, and hiker. Welcome, Ellen.
Hey, thank you, Barb. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, great. We've got an exciting host of questions and thoughts that we would love to share with you and have you share with us. And I will kick it off by turning over to one of our 3 Data Wise guys, Jim Crompton, to start our conversation.
Well, again, welcome, Ellen. I have to, I guess, start all this conversation out with the whole concept of how is data important? Why is data important in Chevron? How do you, kind of, how is the corporation as large and international as Chevron begin to get their arms around this growing beast of big data and digitization and all the other D words that, kind of follow along. Plus, I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about that women in data and AI. That sounds like a fascinating opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Jim, for the starting question here to keep us rolling. And that's a big question. So what does data play in a role? I mean, we know that I think data plays in every company a big role. People say also the companies who are dealing with data and insights will outperform other companies in the future. And I think we know this. We see this already. This is not just a statement. We see this everywhere. And when you look into the data space in Chevron, I think you have some experience. You followed it over many years when you were in Chevron and associated to that. It has never stopped, so I think it matures over time. And when I look into the executives and leaders in Chevron, they turned quite some over the last 2 to 3 years, significantly from talking about a process, now talking about the data and the insights they get out of it. So I just see the language changing. And with the language change, I see the desire of asking questions faster in a better way. They also recognize that the sheer data volume and complexity our human brain cannot consume anymore. So this is impossible. So, and that means we need some other ways to make sense out of data and do it in a different way. I think one person said to me when I was talking, one executive in Chevron, from a business perspective, and I had a conversation with him. He said, Ellen, we know exactly when we look after data, there's always value in it, always. So, and I think these are good statements of acknowledgement how big that is. And I have also to say, learning from a different industry, now coming into oil and gas, this industry deals with a lot of complexity of data. You can think about, it's not only structured data. I think we have more unstructured data than structured data. And that by itself is a challenge, So when you compare us maybe with a finance organization where everything is, I would call it maybe nice and neatly tied up in certain tools, because the transactions are digital today. In our industry, we deal with variety of historic data, unstructured data. geospatial data, rock data, you know, how the rocks are looking like, up to, I mean, it's multifold. It's really fascinating in many ways where we deal with. And these are, I think, from the company perspective, they recognize that when you talk with the exploration leader, they are all about the data, you know, so they know this is their key area to make sense on how to plan. When you look into asset development, what are they doing? They're looking into the data. How does the data look like to make even a plan on what assets we are going after and what we are exploring or not, and how does this link together? So I think that's it's changing, it's maturing. It was always there, you know. So I think some people can say, okay, is it the same old? Some things might be old and something will change. And I certainly see the behaviors and the interest in data changing.
Well, I apologize for not fixing it all before I retired. So I left
Hey,
a bunch of your
I'm very
organizations to do it.
thankful, Jim. I'm very thankful, because otherwise I would have not the job now, maybe. Yeah. So I think the other question you had on the women leaders in data in AI, right? So maybe a funny story. So Asha Saxena, she's a professor in Columbia. She's an entrepreneur in the data space, and she was at a time of her career that she said, okay, I want to make a difference. And she ran over a report saying only when we just collect all the AI and the machine learning algorithms and so on, only let's say 20% of this is contributed by women, and that's a very low number. And when we just imagine that our world will be AI in a certain way, everything what we touch today outside of our normal work and sometimes even inside the work is related to AI, that brings us some concerns. And I immediately got that. And so we teamed up. We founded this, she founded this group, and we chimed in with different companies and executives to make a difference. And difference means, I'm a big believer, it can be done individually, but it's even better doing it in a corporation because you have a much broader reach and impact.
I completely appreciate your perspective on that. And we're also exploring that in our own Women's Day celebration and surveys that we're doing in our own company. So that's an interesting perspective on that. I hadn't thought that the voices that shape the AI that's going to shape our future really will have a much broader impact as those are escalated out. As on the topic of data, and you mentioned that we have voluminous quantities of data, most people would agree that data is a key asset for companies, and those companies that do manage it well and use it well will succeed, or are more likely to succeed. But putting a value on that data is very challenging. How do you approach that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we started that approach actually before I joined the company. I give here credit to our fellow Marjorie Connor too and the team. So they thought about it when we were in an organizational model like a COP, competency center, you know. And in this competency center, the team basically spread out and looked after initiatives in analytics and science, and picked out initiatives and created value with it, and that was captured on the go. And we actually did this now for almost 10 years, or 10 years this year. Had different success, and it was kind of cumbersome, you know, because you can imagine with a big company like Chevron, things are seen in different ways, measured in different ways based on the business line and things. So it was not an easy exercise. But the last 2 years, we had significantly value capture reached and really acknowledged by executives on the data science and analytics. However, we said, okay, maybe we have reached a maturity. Do we need to collect this all again to just prove that there is value? Are we over this now? And how do we approach this in the future? Because our new operating model is not anymore as a center of excellence, but we are spread in the company. So the data science and analytics people, the engineers and so on, they are spread everywhere in the company, in the platforms, in the business units. So that would be just a massive administration undertaking to have a central team to collect this. So we want to give it back into the hands where it's actually happening and capture the value. And typically it's not only data, it can be digital data, it can be something else plus data. So it's very cumbersome to really filter that out. And I think we are approaching a time where we get maybe more away from this and see how is it contributing to the big initiatives we're really driving from a business perspective. And it really doesn't matter if it's enabled by 20% or 35.5% from data science. So I think we already proven that we were very successful in this space, but it is an asset, So we call it still, it's a Chevron asset, because we believe, first of all, Chevron owns it. It's not a personal data what you have in the company. Chevron is the owner. And then on the other side, we said asset, So when you say asset, you have to take care about it. And I think in the past we had some swings of where we took care, then we didn't took care. So we want to put it on more stable legs and sustainable legs moving forward.
I love that shift in the language to really look at it as an asset. It's not just data that's protected, but it's data that's an asset.
Mm-hmm.
We have had the privilege to have you speak at our Houston PPDM conference last April of 2022. And you gave a talk with a title that I just love, The Future That's So Yesterday. Sounds like one of my teenage kids, We've got vast volumes of structured data, unstructured data. They both have value, but obviously the unstructured data is so much more challenging to extract that data out of. How does Chevron know what data is actually being used? And do you have practices in place that archive or delete any stale and unused data? And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that's a excellent question, and I think that's tackling every company. How do you measure data? I would also say the move. Two things happened maybe in the past. The move into a more cloud environment where you collect data in a certain way, which also means that you debundle the data from the original system. So, when you look into the IT world in the past, everything was in one system. You couldn't debundle it. Now all these systems development have created an environment where you can say, this is the process, this is how it's run the flow, but the data is over here. So you could make sense more on managing the data in a different way that came with telemetry, so you can see telemetry is happening. Example, very technical maybe here, but APIs, APIs are connecting between different systems. You can see how many users are there, what are they using, is it really performing the way how we want to have it. So we have all the telemetry now really available and can see it. And in Chevron, we also decided to follow the data productization approach. This is something many people talk about, and saying, how do we package our relevant data products together so that the consumer doesn't have to wait months and months and months and circles to have access to a trustable product they can use to gain their insights or to create their insights approach. And we call it the Amazonian way of consuming and producing data products. And in this data marketplace, we can measure telemetry. We see who is accessing what, and we can also see the feedback given. So we have a feedback loop there. We have an ownership defined there, so the people can approach the owner, say, I'm not sure if I should trust that data product. I'm missing something, or is there a new version coming out? So we are in this phase of the data marketplace and the telemetry behind that. And if you are an Amazon user, they watch what you're looking after, so they know what you're looking at, and then next time you get something offered. And that's the approach we want to also have with the data marketplace in the future. I know you're looking for this. There's something new coming around the corner. We just want to let you know this is there in 2 months or 1 month, or the team is currently working on it. Release version 1 is there. So to get more an offering rather than being kind of going into the marketplace and search, so that's kind of turning the world a little bit around. But that's how we gain more own intelligence because we need the data too on figuring out what's really needed. Because I think in the very past, and we know all of us here, we know we tackled maybe data which was put on a shelf and never looked at it again. And that's what I told my team. No, we are not doing it for getting 100%. Just look for the things which are really needed and make them really good. And then we go from there. So that's the approach, very thoughtful approach, interactive approach, and based on the need, on the need of the business and the functions we have.
Ellen, this is John Jacobs. And what you described sounds wonderful. I mean, being able to track the telemetry of the data, what's being used, and who's using it, that's fabulous. On the backside of that, obviously, the complexity of all the data that Chevron has and most E&P companies have, it takes a pretty strong skill set to understand that data, to be able to maintain it. Can you describe a little bit about what Chevron does to develop those skills and how they might promote data management inside the company?
Yeah, thanks for that question, John. And I think it goes in two ways. The one is maybe more the discipline around data, that you package the data in the right time up and you have all the delivery mechanisms the right way, more the technical knowledge, to handle this and to package it up. On the other side, you have the business knowledge, so it comes out of a business domain or a functional domain. And finance data cannot be handled or owned by an IT person because this person has not the knowledge about the specific, let's say, general ledger data in that. So we really determined that we have technical expertise to do it. And these are the engineers, the architects to basically create that product together with the business domains, which are organized in Chevron in digital platforms. So finance, so finance, they're very good in providing these data products for general usage. They made the list. Okay, we know these are the top, 20, 30 products. They're always asked over and over again. We don't want to handle them case by case and being approached anymore. We just put it out in the place and say, okay, look at that. If you have a question, come back to us. And I think we have two capabilities which we have to cover. And that's why we have these persona defined on who takes what. Is it perfect, John? No, because we started May of last year. So I think we have maybe now 400 products in there. Maybe we have roughly another 300 to 400 in production or in planning. And I'm not giving a special target out because I think it drives the wrong behavior if you say we need 1,000, so then people put things in which don't matter just to meet a certain target. But we are iterating, so I think it works. Just had a conversation yesterday with Corporate Affairs, which is one of our platforms, and they say they're working together with other platforms and they're creating data products because they use now certain things, they pick it up, but they have now the next question to answer, and that requires collaboration. So they're now creating a joint product and put it in the marketplace. So these are the things which are kind of self-sustaining. There's nobody else. I mean, I'm not there to orchestrate what they have to do. They figure out what they need and they collaborate. And do we need more governance and organization around it? Yes, for sure. I mean, we are early stages, to make it sure. But I think the progress we have made is significant. So we will have talks with other companies because they want to understand how we did it, and we just did it. We did it with a very small team.
That's great. Your role is relatively new inside Chevron. I think it'd be interesting for people to understand what the CDO's role really is inside Chevron, and what are your challenges?
Yeah, so I think from a challenge perspective, I mean, first of all, I was not a data officer before, so I had to learn a little bit and grow into this role the same way. I had all the ingredients in terms of my IT past and being maybe a SQL database administrator somewhere in my time. But I needed to understand the other dimensions of that as well. So I learned quite some during that time. I exchanged a lot with other companies to basically learn from others, you know. So I think we are giving and taking, and this is what I started too. And maybe it was more taking at the beginning. Now I'm giving back for the things we learned. But that was maybe a challenge to speed up as fast as maybe the expectation were. And then, of course, I'm relatively new in Chevron. That means I have not the natural 30 years of network within the company, so I have to build this up and build up a trusted relationship with people. So I'm working my way through the organization. I believe I've built a very strong networks. Can it be better, much better? Yes, for sure. I will maybe not catch up with a Jim here, so who has so many connection points. But that's maybe not the purpose. If this would be my target, I would fail maybe till my retirement. I cannot catch up with this. But on the challenges, I would say it takes time, you know. So nothing is done within a year or two. It is a journey. And if you are asked, okay, when are we done? And you say, maybe we are never really done, but we have a very good maturity, we can foundationally answer 80% of the questions in a very good time, I would be very happy. And this is maybe the challenge, to educate everybody in the organization the same way what data means in this company, because we are physical too. You know, we do physical assets. We are doing really difficult things in the field, and to bring the data to the people there and let them help with the data, that's fantastic. So I talked with process engineers just on my last trip to Australia. She was fantastic, and she had all her information and her data up to hand. And I mean, you could tell they are using the data. They are dealing with the data. I saw process mining and using data out of the process mining to optimizing procurement processes there as well. So I think you see more and more people who are not traditionally data people using the data with technology now, which is much more advanced than it was maybe 5 years ago.
That's a really key takeaway. You know, if we expose that data to the people who can make sense of it and analyze it and use it and put it in practice, then we start increasing the value of that data.
Let me, maybe one challenge too, I will disclose that, you know, this company is 140 years old. We have a lot of legacy. We have a lot, you're laughing. So, but I think we have a lot of heritage we are carrying with us. It's hard to let go. It's hard to modernize. Modernization takes effort and takes money and dedication to it. And sometimes maybe in a company we waited too long and then it's getting painful. So I think we want to be more proactive, more mindful with the big initiatives we have running right now, that we are not waiting, that we are really progressing. Let's say we are progressing in ERP, getting one more consolidated ERP setup for the businesses, or in the upstream side, we have this partnership with SLB and Microsoft to approach the field development planning and optimization. So we have significant big backbone applications where we have high interest that the data is right, that the data is connectable and connected to a broader scale. And that's what we are focusing on. But that's a challenge to get buy-in, because you have a short-term value and then maybe you have a little bit of longer value where you have to work continuously on this. But that's maybe a challenge to let go to.
When
Absolutely.
you talked about legacy, I resemble that remark. Yeah, and I do appreciate. I mean, our paths never crossed, but somehow the ghost I must be channeling a lot of these ideas into your head, because I love the fact you were talking about the journey, the value that's you know, should be almost like a culture. Like, I mean, you don't sit and do a cost benefit analysis on safety. It's a culture. Maybe you get to a data culture. Maybe you're the chief data culture officer. With regard to that, you should change the job title. But that's really important, because you're hitting on all of these different themes. One of the goals of PPDM is to try to raise the awareness of the whole industry that data should be professionalized. I mean, it is a professional discipline. Back in the legacy days, yes, the IT technical people, if you were a DBA, that was a technical job. If you were a SQL programmer, that was a technical job. And the IT folks knew how to manage that. But the data handlers, the domain experts, the ones who are really understand if this good data or bad, whatever, they were often the technicians, or they were often an informal extra role that some passionate people would take and work on, but they weren't really considered professionals in that task part of it. They were essential, but they weren't professional, right? So they maybe didn't get the recognition that other jobs did, that other jobs that were kind of recognized as the engineer, geoscientist, or whatever. Just the last question here about recognizing the data warriors in the organization, and how does Chevron, how do you, you obviously are in building your network, are recognizing these people. You don't want to match my network. Most of them all are retired anyway, so that doesn't help you any. But in recognizing the warriors are in the trenches that are working to provide that data to those business decisions, analytical models, et cetera, how do you recognize their work?
Mm-hmm. I think it's very important to recognize the work. And I like the comment you made about the culture officer, maybe. We call it data is in my DNA. That's kind of a cultural approach, how we want to tackle it, because when you get up in the morning, hey, you feel it, data is in my DNA, and that's the culture we are going in our community. And when we recognize people, we actually do a lot of success stories. We do recognition and awards. We do shootouts to cool stuff. We have plenty of opportunity to spotlight teams and individuals. We just had last week somebody from our a senior reservoir engineer, not a data science per se, but he ventured out deeply into this. He got an innovation coin from our Chevron Technology Center leader, Ima Bonner, and recognizing his work in this field on using generative AI in this space. So I think you see the lines are more blurred and it's recognized. And yeah, I'm big in community, so I'm very little hierarchical thinking. So we are all we call it data and insights community, and we give us shootouts across, so everybody has the right and the honor to recognize people or make a success case out of it. So we have lots of digital spotlights posted on our websites, and I would say maybe 80% are in data. Yeah, so that's significant.
Are there like HR career ladders for data management people?
Yeah, good question. Yes, I mean, we have a job family. We call it a job family around data. I'm actually the chair of this, and we are managing careers within this job family around data. And there's a clear career path with education, knowledge, training. You might recall we have a digital scholar program with MIT and Rice, which spends time in terms of systems thinking, but also really data science. So people can apply to that, and they don't have to be IT people. So typically they're coming from around the world, coming from very different business segments, and they return that too with their new knowledge. So it's fascinating to see how they are impacting the teams which were standing there, and they ventured out for a year, come back and bring very different insights and tackle topics very differently.
Wow. I mean, just wow. That's such a wonderful blending of both pure data science and application that's got to bring value. Are you seeing any immediate rewards from that yet? From bringing back that data science experience to their teams?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So we see that in many areas, and you see them basically very intentionally in different teams, associated to different teams, to lift up their fluency in either systems thinking or data science and analytics. We have also a citizen development program where we go out having cohorts in different business units to train people to use the data for their analytics. And the next level is then data science, and helping them. So we educate not only IT people, we actually educate business people. I was there in Australia 3 weeks ago, where one of our data scientists educated maybe a room of 20 business leaders in data science. What is this? What are we doing with it? What are the examples? We are getting very ingrained in all the business areas.
So just one quick thing before we close. I actually have a Chevron employee in my current graduate online class. He's a petroleum engineer that works offshore Eastern Canada. So yeah, I think your organization is trying to raise its digital literacy in a numerous different ways.
This is fantastic to hear. Great. I love these stories when you see somebody venturing out. I know several petroleum engineers who did that. They benefited greatly from this knowledge. They do their work differently than we have done it in the past.
Nice. And that leads us into the future. We are all looking forward to try to figure out and guess what the next challenges are going to be. And you've spoken to many of those. As PPDM has also evolved, we've made some changes to sort of try to adjust to the disruptions in the industry and the challenges coming our way. For example, we just rebranded to become the PPDM Association for Global Data Energy Professionals to address what is an increasingly diversified energy industry, rapidly expanding beyond petroleum, beyond data management, to really develop against so the three data pillars that we have really identified that really are the key to our success are our data communities, our resources, and our data professionals. And in exciting news recently, we just signed a memorandum of understanding with the Blockchain for Energy to start harmonizing our technology and data management and best practices around seismic data management. So as we look forward to try and figure out where we need to position the PPDM Association to succeed, in our closing thoughts here, what challenges or what role do you think societies like PPDM can play as we all move into the future to address the many headaches facing us today and tomorrow?
Yeah, I mean, I would not be here if I would be really a believer in PPDM. We have Curly Thomas very much involved in the organization, and I think you are a great feeder for many standards and definitions in the industry. You're maybe one of the fastest developers in this space, and then education-wise, the PPDM organization is providing a lot of great stuff where we said we don't need to invent this by ourselves. We can just use that. Yeah. And that speeds us up. What I would say, generally speaking, in the standardization area, because when we talk about actually blockchain and energy, one of the colleagues is also chairing that, Raquel Clement, which was in my procurement team before. And so I like these connections. I think these connections between the different bodies are very important to figure out how do we intersect, how do we connect, and how can we speed up. I believe the bigger the organization is, the slower it will get. It's a little bit my relation, So if there are too many people involved, it's slowing down dramatically. And I think in the industry we have to live with it. There will be a standard. You can apply to the standard or you cannot, but to align it with, let's say, 50 people to come to the same conclusion, I think we will see that maybe in the next century then. So we have to speed dramatically up in this space, talking about open forum and other areas. In the carbon sector, we feel it maybe the most, where standards are not progressing as fast. and it's not so clear. And then what happens? Everybody's doing it their own way, and then it's very hard to adjust later on. And we will be hit by regulation. They don't want to have 50 versions of this. So I think that's a challenge in the industry we have to comply with, and we should be happy saying, okay, doesn't have to be invented by one company. Yeah.
Any closing thoughts, John, Jim?
No, when my only closing thought is, we laugh a little bit when you talk about the legacy. And as Jim said, we resemble that remark. But the fact is, we've been fighting this fight for a long time, and love to see that you're making the kind of progress you're making. And then we congratulate you.
No, definitely thumbs up from me. I think, I always thought Chevron was a organization that was ready to take advantage of data, digitalization, the new analytics technology, et cetera. And I think, that you haven't left data behind. I think we see a lot of companies that are kind of fixated by the bright, shiny new toy, the new technology that comes up. But that doesn't mean that, a lot of this technology on bad data is still just bad data with regard to that. So thank you very much for joining us, and even more, thank you for the data culture, maturity, growth that obviously your organization is an example of. So thank you much.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I was really honored to talk to the wise data guys. I listened to some of the podcasts you created, so thanks for sharing your wisdom.
Ellen, we loved having you here with us today. And as usual, we are grateful for the time that John and Jim have spent with us, and Tim, who's unfortunately missing today. We appreciate all of the efforts we're all, putting into improving what we do in the data management space in our industry to move it ahead. For those who are joining this podcast, thank you for listening. And we look forward to you joining us again as we continue to interview some incredible industry leaders helping to move forward the questions and answers around data management. Thank you for listening.